You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We have a specially important show for you today. Two shows, in fact, part one this week and part two next week, because their content is simply too vital to squish into one program. My guests for both part one and part two of our conversation are Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw of the African American Policy Forum and Gina Best, a member of the #SayHerName Mothers Network and Campaign. Today's part one focuses on that campaign and the book that represents it, to which Gina Best has contributed a deeply moving piece about her daughter, India, deceased now, along with other pieces by other women suffering similar losses, together with Kimberlé writing to frame a context for the pieces in American history and society, in sum, an unforgettable book. In part two next week, we'll continue the discussion, but add to it to include thoughts on these two major movements against systemic racism and systemic sexism, and on, yes, intersectionality, since Kimberlé was the mother of the concept and term itself. And then at the end of today's program, we take a sharp turn, or not, to look again at events in Palestine, Israel, which you might say are an international version of what we will be discussing in the body of the episodes. In any event, and before we get to any of that, we need to go inside the headlines. George Floyd, Trevor Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, Amadou Diallo. We know the names, hundreds of names. We've marched while chanting the names, memorialized them as graffiti. We even went global in our demonstrations with the George Floyd protests, demonstrating our horror and our rage over police murders of African American men. But then we were forced to remind all our communities of the police violence and murders of African American women, or else they vanished utterly. So, Say Her Name, which had at first confused people who, in their innocence or ignorance, just hadn't thought about it. Say Her Name, which in 3 words conveyed millennia of silenced and ignored outrage at the forced invisibility of all women, but black women in particular. Say her name as the wings black women could mount and ride like the breath of freedom itself. Say Her Name was born into reality. So now there's a book called, fittingly enough, #SayHerName, with the subtitle, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. It was co-authored by Kimberlé Crenshaw and the African American Policy Forum, and it has a ringing foreword by Janelle Monáe. Kimberlé Crenshaw is a professor of law at UCLA and Columbia Law School. She co-founded and serves as the executive director of the African American Policy Forum, an innovative social justice think tank at the forefront of advancing intersectional justice and multiracial democracy for 25 years. Gina Best, the mother of deceased India Jasmine Kager, is a member of the Mothers Network and Campaign. The heart of this book is the stories. Simple stories. Complicated stories. Their chapter titles give testimony to loss that they share. Titles like Breaking Silence, stolen histories, disposable lives, bearing witness. These are the voices of the mothers and sisters, the relatives of women who suffered tragic deaths at the hands of lethal police power. Some, like those of Rekia Boyd, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor, have become better known, but many, so many, too many, were lesser known until named. As Janelle Monáe writes in her introduction in the book, we all need to amplify these names so that young black girls' names don't have to be added to the list. This powerful book, published by Haymarket, is available at your neighborhood booksellers, or if not there, then from the Independent Booksellers website, or from the African American Policy Forum website itself. Amazingly, though, it's a joyous book, even though it's about lethal, brutal, official murder. It's a joyous book because of the beauty of these women, because of the stubborn fortitude of their living on, their discovered sisterhood in the wake of death, their affirmation as life-giving as oxygen itself of each other and of the imperative they share, which is to forge transformative change. We have to take a short break here, but I'll be back very soon with the conversation and with my two special guests, Gina Best and Kimberlé Crenshaw. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
I'm here with Dr. Kimberlé Crenshaw, otherwise known as Kim, and with Gina Best, who is the mother of India Cougar, and is one of the mothers of the network of the disappeared, the murdered by police, the women for whom we chant, say her name. Welcome, both of you. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having us, Robin.
Oh,
Absolutely, thank you.
My pleasure and my honor. Let me start with you, Kim, because I've known you a long time, and you come up with these amazing, wonderful ideas like Hello, the African American Policy Forum. But also, you came up with Say Her Name, because the men, tragically, for ironic, tragic circumstances, were getting all the attention, and no attention was being paid to the fact that there was police brutality and, in fact, police murder of black women. How did this come to be, and how did it get built into a network of mothers? Say a few words.
Well, Robin, I think the moment that it became clear to us that we needed to turn the imperative of saying her name into an active effort to organize in order to provide people with the information they needed to know in order to say her name came in the middle of the Eric Garner protests.
Yeah.
I think a lot of listeners will remember that there was a spate of killings of African American people, and some of those killings were in the center of the conversation about anti-Black police violence. So Mike Brown was killed, Eric Garner was killed shortly after that, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile. There's just a, almost endless list of names. And during the Eric Garner protest after his killer was not indicted, tens of thousands of New Yorkers took to the streets to protest
We did.
all of these killings.
Yep.
And the African American Policy Forum participated in that march. We created a banner that had the names and photos of Black women who were killed by the police. And our assumption was that we would be marching to uplift the demands for justice for all Black people who'd been killed by the police.
Yeah.
But as we were marching, it was clear that a lot of people didn't know that Black women were also killed by the police. People were shocked to see the banner. Some, they stood frozen, looking at the names and at the pictures. And there were a few who reacted in a way that suggested that our presence there was disconcerting. We were, entering into a space that conceptually was thought of as exclusively male space. And they didn't really understand why we were bringing this message into the march. And that's what more or less made it clear to us that, number one, people did not know Black women were also killed. But number two, the parameters of how we think about anti-Black police violence needed to be actively broadened in order to create space for us to support the families of the women and the girls and the femmes who have been killed by the police. So that's where Say Her Name came from.
Absolutely. And this, tell me the year approximately again when the march.
This was 2015.
2015. Right. And it took off from there. Because I remember it quite early. I remember there being a lot of men mentioned, and then I remember suddenly there were women, and in that strange, really bizarre way, being glad that there were women. You know what I mean? In other words, glad that women were at least being made visible, and that there was passion and rage and protest and anger behind it. But most of all, glad that people were being educated about this, while at the same time, of course, grieving.
Robin, the reality is that, people want to do the right thing. The people who are coming out, who are marching, and who were outraged about the fact that this still happens. Yet our sense is when there aren't frames that are available for people to integrate the facts into their understanding of the issue, it's really difficult to hold on. And for the most part, the way police brutality has been framed has been as a masculine conflict.
Yeah, man on man.
Man on man. And so either people infer that women do not experience this, or if they do, it's about something else. Yeah. And oftentimes that something else is framed as something that women got themselves into, some way that they, got themselves in trouble. Gina talks about this a lot as the, equivalent of rape culture. There's a
blame the victim.
Women are blamed for it. And so it's important not just to name names, but broaden the understanding of how police function and how Black people who are not men are also brought up under that kind of legitimized violence.
Yes. And I think also, once it begins to affect people's behavior, I think it changes people's feelings. I'm thinking now of I've forgotten her name. Almost, it's on the tip of my brain. The teenage kid who had gone out to get an ice pop and filmed on her camera the entirety of George
Floyd killing, yes.
yeah, exactly, murder,
Mm-hmm.
and had the incredible courage to keep filming. There were cops nearby. They threatened her. They walked up to her. They walked around her. She kept filming. And, I don't know that she would have done that unless in some way women and women's, not victimization, but women having been forced to be victims hadn't been made an issue. I don't know. Well, Gina, welcome to the program, and my deepest consolation and sympathies to you for your loss. I know it was 5 years ago, or longer, actually, but it never goes away. And your daughter, from the photograph in the book, is so beautiful. God, she was just exquisite. So
Is she indeed?
Yeah, the loss of that beauty, that internal beauty, a spiritual kind of beauty, as well as her physical beauty, is a loss to all living things, I think. Tell us a bit about how you became involved with the Mothers Network.
And thank you for that. And as we were saying, I'm so appreciative to Dr. Kim for the space that she carved out of what one would think is an obvious din of noise. You would expect the resounding voices of everyone for women to be included, but that's not the case. And it's scathing. It's absolutely searing, mind searing, soul searing, spirit searing, you name the above. And let me speak on India. India was very gentle spirited. And as you can see, she had a very demure way about her, just her persona. But she was highly, and I'm going to say even hyper aware of things around her, including being a woman who, and then also the space of those with, gender fluidity or sexual fluidity. The president India was in that space. But I want to speak on something that Dr. Kim said and actually amplify this further. The men were being uplifted in the media, and the fact that when she said that there was legitimized violence, that phrase right there, I was going to park that and come back. But I want it to be known that India, Jasmine Kager, the beautiful soul, that photo and the wonderful, just absolute detailed account that Dr. Kim has written in Say Her Name. The stories, Black women's stories of police violence and public silence.
Yeah.
That's the part that really I live every day. The police violence and then the public silence, because on a macro level, we see that, but I'm going to chisel it down even to a personal level in that in India's father and grandfather were both police. My son was in law enforcement. My brother-in-law is currently in law enforcement. I have a cousin on police force with Prince George's County. The fact that not one of them, and again, they're police. Her father is retired. Her grandfather is now deceased. Yeah. But the others are still in this realm with us and very much alive. And they do not speak out for India. So it's an even deeper hurt and pain. And that without Dr. Kim Crenshaw having carved this space, where again, the response was at that demonstration that, how dare you even enter this? That somehow women had no space in that. They were shocked. All their intent to be there and protesting was certainly admirable, and we appreciate that. The silence.
Oh, Kim, Gina, how can this be?
Yes,
how can this be? These are family relatives. This is. I'm speechless. I don't know why, but I'm. My God, it's like you throw a rock in a pool, and then there are ripples, and then the water closes over it, and it's absolutely still, isn't it?
Except for the fact, in addition to that, we as women, we drown in cyclonic and turbulent waters because they literally have always wanted to subjugate us as women. And even in death, and murder at the hands of males. Not one of our daughters and sisters were killed by female. They were all killed by men. And there is and also, I'm going to say this, and speaking for India and just specifically, abandoned by men, even in her death, even in her murder, even in all of these beautiful women.
God. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just thinking, Gina always brings to fore dimensions of the loss that go far beyond, if it's even possible to conceive of it, the horror of the initial loss. Mm-hmm. It's compounded by the fact that loss is also lost to the community, to the nation, to the family itself. Mm-hmm. It's
Absolutely.
as though it's incalculable, so it becomes erased. And one of the things that actually has been so moving as mothers and sisters and now daughters come into the network is just seeing the recognition that, okay, I'm not alone in this. I'm not just dealing on my own with an exceptional situation that no one can wrap their heads around.
It's not just me. I'm visible.
Yes. And family abandonment, community abandonment. It wasn't just my daughter that people didn't have the ability to see and show up for. It's all of them.
Yeah, of course.
And that it ends up being empowering because, as Gina will say herself, the way in which the incalculable dimension of it leads people to say, okay, there must be something you did. The way that adds to the grief and the anger is just, I think it is particular to the way families of Black women are experiencing police violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she writes you write, Gina, very movingly about this. You say, I'm always walking the tightrope with my mental health. I'm recognizing the stigma of needing mental health care, coupled with the stigma, if you want to call it that, of being the mother of a Black woman murdered by police. All of these are stigmas we're forced to live through. And then this is just amazing. I have to be very careful with how I present myself. If I'm seen as weak, I may not even get custody of my grandson because I can be viewed as unstable. But but it's impossible to experience this loss and come through unscathed and stable. There's no way. You've heard me say that I walk around with an amputated heart.
Amputated heart.
And this is literally the case. Here it is, a bleeding heart. My God, that's beautiful writing, and it's true. And it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
It literally is.
Oh, that you're crazy no matter what you do. And the network of mothers has been what? A home, a family, a solace to you, an energizing force. Talk about its effect.
I would say a haven. I'm going to call it a haven. And the reason being is because no matter what, and I just have to, again, Dr. Kim has taught me so much, and I listen, and I'm always in awe and amazed. But, she just said, even as we're sitting here talking, I'm taking the notes. She says, calculus of survival of existence, an incalculable dimension of pain. Yeah. The challenge is, how does one develop a calculus for survival and existence in the midst of everything that we're faced with as Black women in this society? Yeah. And I do mean everything from, here I am, a mother who was murdered in front of her child by a lynch mob.
Yeah.
In the back seat, 4-month-old baby. And no one can say that they didn't know. With every last one of my sisters in this Say Her Name Mothers Network, the police who murdered them and pulled the trigger were very much cognizant of their actions. It's not an accident, nor was it knee-jerk. because they have this so-called training. Well, they've been trained to literally, and unfortunately in this society, try to obliterate the existence of Black women. And this goes from not just, well, in addition to the murder, which is horrible, but we could take this all the way back to the suffrage movement. We could take this so many dimensions of United States society. And what does that speak to? It speaks to the embedded reality and terrors of white supremacy, misogyny. It speaks to everything that we as women, Black STEMs, Black trans, which Say Her Name embodies all of that. Because let me just say this, Black women and trans women are being killed too. And unfortunately, they don't even speak their names any more than they speak the names of my daughter and any other woman who's been murdered at the hands of bloodthirsty, murderous males. Yeah. And I'm very angry about it. And I embrace my anger because now this whole trope of a angry Black woman that's again spoken against us to silence us. Yeah. If we say that we're selfish, that's spoken against us to silence us. If we say that we're just what the word that they always use against Black men and women is uppity, is to silence us. The problem that we face in the United States society, and dare say even globally, but I'm speaking the United States where we are, is that no matter what they say, the very bedrock, the very fabric of government, of existence for Black people on this country has been built upon violence, as evidenced by the murder of my daughter.
That's right. And it is systemic. And
it's systemic, and yes.
All the points that you make, that when you protest this, it's knocked down that way, and then if you protest that, that's knocked down another way. Those are part of the system. That is why it's a systemic racism and sexism, and they are knotted together in one hideous knot. And it's women, Black women in particular, who suffer from that horridly.
Has always been.
Yeah, and has always been.
Has always been. The rape culture that they blame, that our daughters and our sisters were responsible for their own murder at the hands. They didn't initiate that. Not one woman, not one, in the book that Dr. Kim has written, and those who have unfortunately even been, not one initiated these actions.
Oh, of
they
course
were done by
not.
the men.
Of course
in
not.
Proximity.
Women don't go around inviting rape. This is insane. This is a male fantasy. This is not has to do with any reality whatsoever. Only pain has to do with the reality, and with this reality in particular. Well,
and might. I think the analogy, that Gina has consistently raised is the way that the entire culture built around police power is a parallel to the culture built around male power. So in the same way that when there is a rape trial, for example, you have both the dynamic of the woman actually being on trial.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
What did you do? Why were you there?
How did you provoke
it? Responsibility, for what happened. There is a very analogous set of questions that have been raised around a Black woman's death. Well, who was she with? Why was she with him? What was she doing? What did she do to create this trouble for herself? Mm-hmm. And that's a particularly sort of gendered interrogation, right?
Of course it is.
So much so that, I'm sure, Robin, your listeners know that sometimes women themselves are unreliable as jurors in rape trials because they want to believe that it can't happen to them. They want to believe that somehow the woman had some role, exercise some agency in putting herself. Yeah. It's a self-defense mechanism to not recognize the vulnerability that we all walk around with.
That's right.
We're seeing the same thing with respect to women being killed. People don't want to believe that the police can actually roll up on you and pretty much get away, with killing you in any number of circumstances.
Who would
We
want to
don't wanna
believe that?
believe that.
Oh, no,
So
yeah.
it's constantly like, okay, well, what did she do that put herself in that circumstance? And as long as that's the impulse,
Yeah.
it's extraordinarily difficult to actually shift the gaze and focus on police who kill women rather than women who are in the position to get themselves killed.
To get themselves killed, God.
Get themselves killed.
Get themselves killed, yeah. Well, we've got to do it. We've got to shift that gaze. And I'm old enough now, Kim, to go back to the civil rights movement and go back to the days of Martin Luther King, etc., and consistently straightforward. And I do see change. I see change primarily among my Black sisters. I see leadership in the women's movement, nationally and internationally, more and more coming from Black women. I see it as a combination of high intelligence and strategy combined with compassion and smarts, just plain old smarts. And also, a consistency of, as years ago, Fannie Lou Hamer, the great Fannie Lou, said, keep and going to keep going. And I am so glad that I lived to see this point where leadership in the women's movement has moved to third world women, to women of color, primarily, however, to Black women. And, I think that there's got to be change in systemic racism because of that. I think that the
not without a cost.
Yeah, that it's impossible to not have those ripple effects touch the Black movement, all male movements, all of color movements, environment, every single thing, because that is a leadership that's undeniable. So I'm very grateful to you, Kimmy. I swear to God, you just keep on giving. And you do. You come up with these wonderful ideas like critical race theory. Hello.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different conversation these days.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's terrible to interrupt at this point when it's really a cliffhanger moment. But we will continue next week when Kim will talk about intersectionality, which she did really mother into existence. And we'll also discuss the Me Too movement and lots of other very interesting things with these two remarkable women. So be sure to come back for that with Kimberlé Crenshaw and with Gina Best. And in the meantime, stay tuned because you know what's coming up. Fighting Words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Not giving up. Those are fighting words. Moving fighting words for this week from our conversation to the Middle East. Well, it isn't a disruption, really, since the same principles apply. Structural supremacies of sex and race, power colluding with power over the heads of the disenfranchised and dispossessed who are being silenced, power accruing to power, and powerlessness to powerlessness, in a repetitive circle, all of it disguised by the standard rhetorical banalities, which manage to be boring as well as lethal at the same time. We need to refocus on the Middle East for a number of reasons. First, timeliness. Oh, not about the length of the conflict itself, which has been going on, depending on when you start counting, for millennia, or at least since 1948. Besides, this can't be literally timely because I'm writing it in stages, starting last Tuesday, and the various developments keep changing. No, timeliness in terms of an actually negotiated, haggled over, renegotiated and re-renegotiated, and finally announced pause in hostilities. Not a ceasefire, you understand. Not a truce. Not a respite, a break, a lull, or a lessening of hostilities. Just a, pause. Apparently, terminology relating to peace is too difficult for combatants' tiny minds to wrap themselves around, so that they can't even agree on what to call not murdering each other. Nevertheless, Israel and Hamas agreed to a deal, and then, oh, hallelujah, to extend the fragile pause in fighting in Gaza by 2 days. Then, hush, by 2 more. The deal, mediated by Qatar and Egypt, would see additional Israeli women and children hostages released from captivity in the Gaza Strip each day, and some foreign nationals, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails, plus the admission of humanitarian aid trucks bearing food, water, medical supplies, and fuel for the desperate Gazan population. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm grateful for any cessation, no matter how brief or tenuous, of deadly rhetoric and deadly acts. But that compromise, that settling for, that gratitude, that's how they get us. Earlier, Hamas said on Telegram that it is seeking an extension to increase the number of those released from imprisonment. Now, under the terms of the agreement, the pause could be extended by a day for every additional 10 hostages released by Hamas beyond the initial 50. Yet a few days ago, the whole thing almost tanked over an argument about whether mothers should be allowed to join their children or whether separating them was preferable. No incredulous laughter, please. This was an actual discussion. Political and military leaders on both sides of the conflict take such a discussion very seriously, because they are still spouting rhetoric about the bloody violence they plan to each wreak on the other side as soon as the fragile pause is over. Meanwhile, there are the people. There are the Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but in West Bank, and there are the Israelis throughout the country. The people, by and large, mostly very, very large, are joyful in welcoming the pause. In West Bank, there was dancing in the streets. People hugged each other and laughed and sang. Hundreds of Palestinian teenage male prisoners, arrested under vague administrative detention for unspecified crimes like marching, picketing, and for little boys stone-throwing, unashamedly let their weeping mothers kiss them in public. Ooh! There was ecstatic waving of the Palestinian flag. The Palestinian flag, mind you, not the Hamas flag. And all over Israel, except where the zealous, ultra-religious right-wing holds sway and the illegal settlers have tried to put down roots, there was comparable celebration at the release of more hostages each day. People cried for joy and wept for joy, unable to tell the difference. Hostages freed now into their families' embraces, found those families reduced in numbers because of massacre by Hamas. Joy was shaded by sorrow and by grief and loss on both sides. But it shone through, that intangible something in the human spirit, so desperately thirsty to hope, to not give up. And this is how they get us. You may well ask of your television set, as I did, why is it only a pause? Why have both sides agreed on one thing only, that they are extending it in miserly bits 2 days at a time? Why so grudging with peace and so generous with war? All you would need to do is to put the pause on a permanent loop, to repeat itself just as you do with war, to repeat itself again and again, over and over. You wouldn't even have to call it peace if that's too upsetting. You could call it suspension of hostilities or a change of view. Hell, you could call it anything as weighty as an armistice or as inane as a schnuckenduffel. I don't give a damn so long as people don't have to kill and to die in it. Because don't you see? The people on both sides of this anguish are saying exactly the same things. Over and over they say, I love you, I missed you, I longed for you to be home. Are you hungry? God, you look so tired. Oh, how thin you are. Oh, see here where they hurt you. Oh, how I love you, how I missed you, oh my God. Both prisoners and hostages now, freed, weep with relief. Any pretension of unemotional manliness peeling away. And I want to run through the streets screaming, don't you see? They're saying the same thing. Listen to them, hear them. But their leaders don't hear them. Their leaders don't listen. They don't even listen to themselves when they demand the release of women and children as if it were all one word. And this is how they get us. Psychotically, willfully ignorant. They don't even know that the entire reason for the women and children first trope, used for a shipwreck or a prisoner exchange, isn't gallantry. It's because of both sides of male combatants, and yes, they are male combatants, agree on this alone, that women and children represent the future of the species, and therefore the assured continuance of victims to be ground up reliably in the jaws of their wars. That this requires women to be perceived primarily as wombs, and children mainly as cannon fodder, is apparently to be considered collateral or irrelevant. So no, their leaders don't hear them, Israelis and Palestinians alike, weeping for joy, dancing in the streets over a few days of peace. They don't hear them for other reasons, too. They're listening to other voices. Elon Musk met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel on Monday. The billionaire's visit comes as he faces criticism for loosening content restraints, and for content moderation loosening, and for having himself enthusiastically amplified by retweeting anti-Semitic tropes on X, the platform he now owns, formerly Twitter. Earlier, Israel's communication minister said that Musk agreed to operate Starlink satellites in Gaza, owned by Musk, but only with Israel's approval. And I want to run through the streets again, this time shrieking, "You idiots! You don't even know who the real enemy is. You shake hands with this white South African sociopathic madman because of his wealth and his power and technology, while your own people suffer, both peoples, as usual, as always. So you can welcome Elon Musk and make deals with him, even if he's virulently anti-Semitic, but Hamas damn well better not be. Or maybe it's okay if Hamas is anti-Semitic, so long as they express it over Starlink satellites owned by Musk that, what a bonus, have Israel's approval. This is verifiable madness, a penis-centric collusion of mutual murder. That's who the adversary is. That's an intersectional Venn diagram of power and greed and death. A madness that has just made itself visible again with the 11th hour announcement, just moments before the midnight expiration date of the latest pause, that Hamas and Israel have agreed on another extension, this time for only 1 day. So we proceed in 24-hour dribbles, ekings out of time. God, but these men love brinksmanship and last-minute adrenaline-saturated deadlines. They did this, though, only because of enormous pressure from the street, the Arab street and the Israeli population, both of whom are ordinary people organizing furiously to insist on more hostage and prisoner releases and more aid going into Gaza. No one knows what will happen after this last 24-hour non-truce extension, but we've tried everything else, and this is all that's left, and this is how they get us. Although there is a new phrase being floated, restarting the war. A reluctance to restart the war, the concept, unnamed, however, that the war was ever stopped. The idea that it would have to be started again all over from scratch. That's something, anyway. So we women, with a weariness born from centuries of stubbornly lugging hope around, we wait for release of the hostages and prisoners. We prepare their favorite foods. We welcome them with open hearts. And we rejoice in the streets, wearing mezuzahs and keffiyehs both, and not giving up, not giving up, not giving up again. Hope is how they get us. Hope is all we have, not giving up. Hope is how they get us. Hope is all we have, not giving up. Hope is all we have. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burden. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.